Good morning. This is Dylan Jovine with Behind the Markets. Happy Tuesday. Today is Tuesday, April 7th. And today I'd like to talk about a new note out from JP Morgan identifying a massive opportunity and raising the alarm on our electric grid. And here's what a lot of people don't know. Our electric grid, the wires running underneath our cities and strung on the poles, the electric poles that dot across the country, they are on average nearly 60 years old. Think about that. That is a big problem. The electric grid, most of it, was built in the 60s and 70s. Remember, we win World War II. Eisenhower's president in the 50s, basically. And he sees the German Autobahn, and he says, we need to build a highway system like that in America, and he does. And also the Great Move West. This is the 60s, and they're putting up poles and electrical lines and all this other stuff. But that stuff is really old by now, and it really makes us vulnerable, not only in an economic way, but also in a national security way for a bunch of reasons. Using this decades-old infrastructure is very vulnerable to, obviously, extreme weather, cyber attacks, geopolitical threats, all the normal bugaboos in this thing. Now, we're not the only people in the post-World War II world that built out their infrastructure. If you look globally, $5.8 trillion is expected to be spent in the next 10 years just upgrading grids around the world. And that's being driven by, of course, the AI story, where you're seeing this 50% increase in power demand. 50% increase. AI build out. The AI build out has aggregate expecting and right now adding 50% pull on our nation's power supplies. It's really unbelievable. So you have this massive mismatch between what AI companies want to build and what the actual grid that we have right now can actually support. That's why you're starting to see, we've talked about this before, data center growth slowing. You see the strain already coming up. Plans for US data centers actually fell by 50% in the fourth quarter of 2025 compared to the third quarter, in part because the grid is nearing its limit, really. It's a very, very tricky situation, very, very dangerous. So you're starting to see that growth slow, and it reminds me of something that Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, the CEO, said that if China wins the AI race, it'll be because their grid is a lot newer and better. It'll be because of electricity. And you know, it's interesting, in America First Fortunes, we talk about this exact thing. We posted a new video, an interview between John and Mark Rossano, the founder of C6, and one of the sharpest minds in global energy and supply chains. And he says the same thing. The real story right now isn't chips, it's electricity. And this is 100% true. It is really electricity. There is no doubt about it. Now, I remember last year when JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon came out and said, look, we're going to spend, JP Morgan itself is going to commit $1 trillion thereabouts of its own capital investing in projects like this that are critical for national security. And this is critical for national security in a couple of reasons. Forgetting about weakness for cyber attacks with these old grids, I also think to myself, we have such high debt. Now, there's a strong contingent that says, look, we're growing at about, we're chugging our long-term growth rate since the financial crisis seems to be around 2%. The problem is, why can't we grow at 3%? This is what Trump is proposing. Why can't we grow at 3%? For us to grow at 3% or 3.5%, we really need to modernize things like our grid to unleash the kind of capacity and the drive that we want. So the grid is becoming a major bottleneck to our ability to grow. So you're going to see a lot of investment in this area. And when you grow at 3%, heck, if we grew at 3% on average since the financial crisis, everybody, the average American, would make about $12,000 more a year. That's how much richer we'd be if we grew just 1% higher in our growth rate. For the last 20 years, it'd be about $20,000. The average American would be $20,000 richer if we had grown at 3% instead of 2%. It shows you how important that GDP growth number is. It also speaks to the fact that we have a lot of debt on one side, okay, a lot of debt. Some argue that we can outgrow. The only way for us to really get ahead of that is to outgrow that debt. And that argument has merits and it has drawbacks. There is truth to the argument. The more you grow, the bigger the gap you put between your GDP and your total debt, which is right now at about 100%. Our debt matches our GDP. But if we really were growing at 3%, our GDP would be up here. Now, history says those yo-yos in Washington would have spent every extra GDP dollar they can, so maybe it wouldn't have worked that way. Faster growth lifts more people out of poverty. It's better. So we have to get rid of these regulations. We got to upgrade our grid. And to that end, I said JP Morgan has dedicated $1 trillion of its own capital, really is going to be partnering with people, and they've been making investments at key points in America's critical infrastructure. One of them is a company that we really like, that we talked about in America First Fortunes, that we recommended in America First Fortunes at about 27. It's about 29, so it's still in our strike zone. So if you haven't read the report, check it out right now. We are very, very excited about it. Anyway, that's all I have for you today on this lovely Tuesday. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.